Hi, I am Andrew Gamble from Seattle University in Washington. My commitment to action is to work with rural farmers in Malawi for their economic empowerment. To be a lifelong learner is to appreciate diversity, is to appreciate other people's efforts, and it is also to travel.
Hello everyone, I'm VINNY JOHL, a CGIU alum, class of 2010. As a CGIU student, my commitment to action was a community garden at the University of Pacific, which I'm proud to announce still is thriving and providing sustenance and education for the community. And since 2013, I have helped hundreds of students develop their projects, learn new skills, and lead their communities as a CGIU commitment mentor. CGIU changed my life. It helped me grow and introduced me to the world's next generation of young leaders, many of whom I consider my closest friends. I would like to take a moment to welcome the CGIU class of 2022 students to this amazing, supportive, and inspiring community. I would also like to thank the students of CGIU class of 2022 for submitting their questions for our town hall conversation today. It is now my honor and pleasure to introduce you to our CGIU Town Hall speakers, Secretary Clinton and Chelsea Clinton.
Thank you so much, Vinny. We are so delighted to be with you, and thank you for your ongoing commitment to CGIU. And of course, we're thrilled to welcome the class of 2022.
Yes, and Vinny, thank you, just in an echo to my mom, for being with us. And I hope that you are just as proud as you should be that kind of what started as your commitment has kind of led to impact you probably couldn't even imagine a dozen years ago when you were a CGIU student. So thank you for sharing your story with us and enabling so many of our current students to share a little bit of their stories and ask us questions today.
Great. Well, let's get started with our first question from Linda.
My name is Linda Chepkoni. I'm a student at the United States International University, Africa in Nairobi, Kenya, and my CGIU commitment is focused on making education more accessible to every child in Kenya through school feeding programs as well as community libraries. My question to you is, what is your biggest satisfaction when you see the impact of CGIU globally? And also, what pushes you to run CGIU annually? Thank you.
Well, Linda, thank you so much for your question. And certainly from my perspective, part of what just continues to excite and inspire me about CGIU is that kind of the community is ever growing. We now have had well north of 10,000 students participate from almost, not quite every, but almost every country on earth across more than 1,000 colleges and universities and kind of programs of study and areas of interest and focus and also commitment. And so part of what excites me is just that there are ever more students who want to tackle challenges close to their heart, sometimes which are very close to their home, Linda, as your commitment is, and sometimes that are kind of much, much further away than being in their own community or on their own campus or even in their own country. And then all the stories behind those commitments. I mean, as we heard kind of Vinny talk earlier about the first commitment that she made kind of with a community garden that now has led to many other gardens. And if you kind of really kind of pressed me up against kind of the proverbial or actual wall and said that, I had to pick one thing, I would say the commitments that are catalyzed really at CGIU. So where the students are able to meet each other, even in these virtual times, to kind of share their ideas, kind of share what they've learned so far, figure out how to kind of cooperate and collaborate together to have, an even greater impact. And hopefully that work together not only increases impact, but creates the lifelong bonds that VINNY talked about. I just love hearing that, so many of her closest friends today, a dozen years after she was first a CGI U student, really came kind of from her experiences at CGI U. And then all of that helps explain why this is such an important part of our work at the Clinton Foundation, because we want to continue to kind of provide opportunities for students to learn from one another, learn with one another, learn from CGI U alums, learn from experts kind of in their various fields, to be able to continue to hone their own commitments, hopefully expand the impact of their commitments by working with others, and then also build relationships that not only will help support their commitments in the here and now, but hopefully be meaningful kind of to their professional and their personal lives well into the future.
Linda, I totally agree with what Chelsea said. And I would only add that from our perspective, doing CGI U every year is a commitment that the Clinton Foundation has ever since it began to young people, and to trying to empower young people in particular, everyone, but especially the young, to be problem solvers, to help find some positive paths forward in what is a very difficult time in world history right now, with so many challenges. And I love, Linda, your commitment about improving education and using nutrition and feeding programs at schools and libraries to do that. So both Chelsea and I wish you the very best.
Great. And our next question comes from Carolina.
My name is Karolina Łagodzka. I'm a student at Jagiellonian University in Krakow, Poland. And my CGI U commitment is focused on responding to community needs during the time of crisis. My question is, what is the best piece of advice you have been given?
Well, Carolina, I'm delighted that you are working in the important critical area of responding to community needs during times of crisis as we speak. We know what's going on in Ukraine, and we know the enormous outpouring of support from the people of Poland and the Polish government for the refugees who are seeking safety in your country. And that's really connected to the best piece of advice I ever got, which came from my mother. Everybody has disappointments, setbacks, crises, problems in their lives. That's part of the human experience. So it's not surprising that one would be facing some kind of disappointment or failure. Maybe not on the scale of having Russia invade your country, for heaven's sakes, but certainly in every walk of life, in every part of the world, in every part of history, it's been true that people face these kinds of challenges. And that may not be in your control, but what is how you respond to it. If you get knocked down for whatever reason, if you suffer a loss of whatever kind, you have a choice. Are you defeated and discouraged and literally left on the floor because of that? Or do you pick yourself back up? Do you find the resilience, the energy, the hope that is needed to keep going? And I think about that particularly now with all of the horrors coming out of Ukraine and all of the extraordinary response to that horrible catastrophe from people in Poland and so many other places. So thank you for focusing on this particular CGI U commitment at this time.
And Carolina, I would just add to what my mother shared, although certainly my grandmother's mantra of life is not about what happens to you, it's about what you do with what happens to you, is probably the best piece of advice I've ever received as well. There are kind of two other pieces of advice that I think about fairly often. One was from my first grade teacher, who would tell me and all of us, that tomorrow is another day. You can make different choices tomorrow. You can hopefully make better choices tomorrow. And I think that is true not only when we're in first grade, but every day of our lives. As students, as adults, it's true in our professional lives, it's true in our personal lives. And the other piece of advice I got from my mom, which I think is important to kind of anyone who's in the arena, anyone who is kind of wrestling with challenging problems, not just kind of in the four corners of our own brain, but kind of in a public square, whether it's the public square of social media or it's the public square of a classroom or, across a campus, or it's really trying to convince a whole community to recognize the urgency of a challenge or kind of the salience of the solution that you're proposing. Which I'm going to paraphrase her, but effectively it's important to take, serious criticism from serious people seriously. Your teachers, your mentors, your advisors, your CGIU mentors here, friends, family, people who have your best interest at heart. And then it's also important to take unserious criticism from unserious people unseriously, people who just want to tear you down, people who don't have your best interest at heart, people who don't share kind of your vision for a healthier, more equitable, more sustainable, just world, really centered on kind of letting communities determine what their solutions should be and then being empowered to architect those solutions. I think that that's important advice for all of us, that we hopefully are always receptive to, criticism that could help us be better. And hopefully we are not vulnerable to criticism that is trying to stop us from being our best.
Thank you. And our next question comes from Ryan.
My name is Ryan Ajay Kanapali. I'm a student at Regent's University London in London, the United Kingdom. And my CGI commitment is called Solidarity Sports, which aims to support children who come from a background of trauma and an uneasy upbringing. My question is this: for students graduating university this summer, we are taking our first steps into the real world, into the workforce, whichever sector we end up in. All of us have strengths in different areas of the workforce. What advice would you give to students like us graduating and taking our first steps into making a difference in the world to help change lives for the better and to become successful individuals that inspire others around us to do good for society?
Ryan, I think there are so many different ways to answer the question because, as you rightly point out, people will be making different choices, what areas of the workforce they are going to first enter. But I would say in general, it's really important for you, and that means not just you, Ryan, but you collectively, all of our CGIU students, to find something that you are excited about doing every single day. That when you wake up in the morning, you can't wait to get to work. You think that there is going to be a new set of opportunities and challenges that is going to help you grow, make an impact, a contribution. And when you no longer feel that way, you probably should think about changing direction. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're going to have a long work life, most likely. And so you need to be really feeling good about what it is you are doing every day, because that's how you help make a difference for others. And some people will make that difference in their workforce life. Some people will make that difference in their extracurricular, avocational life. But constantly be asking yourself, is how I'm spending my time, is it really giving me satisfaction? Is it filling me up? Do I feel like I'm living a purpose-driven life? Because it's very hard to help others and to make a contribution unless you have that real sense of determination and meaning in your own life. So look for that and really follow it wherever it might lead you.
And Ryan, I would just say, since you asking your question about kind of, what advice in thinking about how to make an impact, I hope that, for you, Ryan, and for anyone who is joining us, who lives in a democracy, you will hopefully vote in every election, and you will think about, even if kind of running for office isn't the right choice for you, how to get involved in campaigns to elect people you do believe in would be good stewards of kind of hopefully bringing the world that you want to live in kind of closer to reality, whether that's at the local level or the national level, and also how to get involved in campaigns to put pressure on our governments to take climate change as one example, kind of more urgently, and to marshal kind of more meaningful action toward ameliorating the effects of climate change and trying to kind of prevent the worst of climate change from arriving. Because I do think we are all citizens, and some of us do live in democracies, and we are able to participate then, hopefully, in helping to kind of build the country that we want to see, that we want to live in, that we want to work in. And so I would hope that in addition to everything that my mom said, you'll also think about running for office yourself, encouraging your friends to think about running for office, and get involved in the political process as a voter, and hopefully more, along with following my mom's great advice too.
Our next question is from Alexandria.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yandy Wong. I'm a student at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, and my CGIU commitment is focusing on helping to build accessible and inclusive digital communities for Gen Z youth. My question for the Clinton family is, when faced with challenges in your life or your work, how do you continue to hold on to things like love, motivation, joy, and balance? Thank you.
Oh gosh, Sandy. Well, thank you for your commitment, and thank you for your question. I'll answer, and then of course, kind of hand the Zoom over to my mom. For me, I do not believe I can do everything every day that I might want to do. I try to think of balancing my life over the increments of kind of a week or even weeks, and not hours. That being said, I really prioritize spending time with my children, both because it's the type of parent that I want to be. I want to be an involved and engaged parent. I am admittedly obsessed with my children and think they are the three greatest human beings to have ever lived. And also because they give me so much joy. I mean, when you ask about kind of how do I hold on to things like joy and love, I feel profoundly grateful that I have three living examples of endless kind of love and joy, and kind of the more kind of I'm able to love them, just the more love I feel is created in my own heart and my own life. And then also I'm a big runner. So I try to run like 5 times a week. I don't make it every day, but I try to run, 5 times a week. And sometimes I can only run for 20 minutes, and sometimes I can run for 2 hours. And that's the time when I really do feel is when I connect to myself, kind of get into the deeper thinking, to be able to wrestle with whatever questions I've been kind of maybe fumbling around, and really it provides great clarity for where I want to spend time and energy, over the time ahead. Sometimes the time ahead is an evening, and sometimes the time ahead is the length of maybe a new project that I want to take on. So spending time with my kids, my parents too, albeit especially my kids, and running have been hugely important to me, especially over the course of the pandemic.
Well, Sandy, I can vouch for the fact that Chelsea is a runner, and I'm so proud and impressed that she ran the New York City Marathon this past November, and her dad and I were at the finish line to cheer her on, along with her wonderful husband, Mark. But what she said, I think, is a real guidepost. Being with people that you love, and of course, I fully agree with her description of her 3 children, my grandchildren, is center to everything. I mean, how do you, and so for some people, it is their family. For other people, it's their chosen family, their friends, others who they are close to, who give them the unconditional love and reinforcement and guidance, and in the case of kids, discipline and attention that is needed. But find people that are positive influences. I am a huge believer in walking away from the toxic people that everybody runs into in life. They're all over the place. They are negative. They're pessimistic. They want to kind of bring you down because they can't figure out how to get up. Do not dwell there. And secondly, what Chelsea said about running, find something you love, a habit. Now, I'm a walker. I am not a runner, never have been, never will be, but I adore walking. And so I try, to go for a long walk, about an hour walk, as many days of the week as I can. And I really was quite committed to that during the pandemic because, of course, we were all at home and one of the few places we could go was outdoors. But I find it helps to clear my head and really gives me, a sense of being grounded. And finally, I would say a lot of, finding motivation and joy and balance is not a one and done kind of thing. I mean, you have to be constantly evaluating. Is this satisfying me? Am I making the kind of contribution that I think I can? Is my life out of balance? Am I spending too much time at work? Am I spending not enough time trying to do the work that I am engaged in? So you have to be really honest with yourself and ask these questions on a regular basis and listen to yourself. Listen to, whether you're feeling good, whether you are sleeping well, whether you're, in a good frame of mind. And that will give you some indicators as to whether you're in or out of balance. And I think that's really important, for all of us. And as I say, it's ongoing. It's not something you decide on and then it never changes, because that's just not the way life is.
Yes, I think, I certainly, Mom, as you were talking, I was remembering how when I was working on my PhD, I realized there was like a whole week where I hadn't spoken to anyone outside of my PhD advisor. Like I just hadn't talked to anyone. I mean, maybe the Starbucks barista like at 6:30 in the morning, like I just hadn't talked to anyone. And I think in some ways, because it was so extreme, it was like Friday, I was like packing everything up and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't talk to anyone. I was like, wait, I didn't. I was going to think like, oh, I just like didn't talk to my mom. But then I was like, oh no, I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't talk to anyone. And I was horrified. I was like, oh, that's not healthy. Like, it's not healthy to have not spoken to anyone in my family or my friend for a whole week. And then I, had to remind myself so I didn't kind of fall into that pattern subsequently. But just to share that I think the ongoing querying is really important, especially kind of after the last 2 years, and that we are still kind of living through a pandemic, making sure that we are in touch with ourselves so that we can be in touch with others, so that we can be the parent and the friend and the person and the daughter that we want to be, I think is really important and good advice.
Our next question comes from Sparsh.
Hi, Chelsea and Secretary Clinton. My name is Sparsh Sharma. I'm a student at the University of Southern California in the United States. And my CGI U commitment is focused on increasing access to remote learning by cutting down the internet required for it through our e-learning platform called SIT, which stands for Simulated Interactive Teaching. My question is, based on your experience as a student and as a parent, what subject or subject matter do you think goes undertaught in American schools?
I have to say that's a question I would have answered differently a few years ago. But I think now I have to say history and civics, how we put together, run and sustain a democracy, and what the historical trend lines are. There's a lot of subjects that need a great deal of attention. Obviously, the STEM subjects everybody talks about, and clearly that has to be continued to get the emphasis it requires. I'm a big believer in the liberal arts, so education in the humanities, in literature and language and all of that is so important. But I have been incredibly struck and very concerned in our country at least, how little is known about our common historic experience. And this is something we're seeing being politicized. And so trying to figure out how to explain and teach history and the responsibilities that everyone has within a democracy is something I hope you'll spend some time thinking about, because I think we really need it.
Ms. Barsh, I just want to emphatically agree with my mom. Civics is not a required course in most states here in the United States, and it is not kind of an additional requirement in most school districts. And I would like us to kind of be in a place where not only was civics, prioritized kind of in the pedagogy, but that there really existed, age appropriate participatory civics curriculum, so that kids at all levels of school were learning about not only kind of the balance of powers, which is still in kind of most social studies and history textbooks, but also kind of, well, what does that mean? Like, well, what role does the legislature play at a state level or even a city level? And certainly, in Washington, what is the role of the executive? What is the role of the judiciary? I also think there's not a good understanding, which is really just, again, a collective failing, that we haven't taught Americans to be able to have a good understanding of what happens at a local level, a state level, or a federal level. We spend a lot of attention, understandably, especially over the last handful of years, over who's in the White House, and certainly who's in the White House really matters. There's also, though, very big decisions made at the state and local level that have enormous impact on things like what gets taught in schools or on criminal justice reform. And so I just would agree so strongly with my mom that we, need to be teaching civics in a robust way. I also would say it has been quite painful to see all of the PE classes that have been stripped out of schools. That, when I was a kid in the Little Rock public school system in the 80s and early 90s, I had PE every day. And in most elementary and middle schools today, students are lucky if they have PE twice a week. And so I also think, while this may not have been what you would have expected us to answer, if I could, fix a lot of things, I would also fix, civics and history first. But I would, again, reinstitute prioritizing, especially for elementary school aged kids, physical education, be able to be outside when the weather is compliant, be able to be in nature, be able to be in kind of outdoor physical space together, but also learn how to use their bodies and relate to their bodies and kind of feel confident in their bodies and understand what it means to be healthy. So I would, if I had a magic wand and I could do lots of things, I would also add that in.
All right, our last question today comes from Rizvan.
My name is Rizvan Fonce, and I'm a student at the Babeș-Bolyai University of Cluj-Napoca in Romania. My CGI U commitment to action is related to developing opportunities for future young Romanian leaders. My question is, young people are the authors of a prosperous future, but they also represent the essence of a present that should be centered on their perspectives, needs, and priorities. After a pandemic that generated devastating effects in terms of humanitarian, health, economic, social, and political aspects, a war broke out beyond the borders of my country, Romania, generated by the invasion of Russia on Ukraine. Young people are deeply affected by all of this problematic phenomena, and their lives are severely impacted in this context, and of course by the uncertainty and lack of societal security. However, their only chance was to develop a sense of strong and empowered resilience. Young people became a generation of resilience. They assumed security as their mandate, and they prove it through various mechanisms. I see it in the young Romanians helping their fellow Ukrainian friends in this humanitarian crisis. I see it in young innovators developing unique solutions to various societal problems. I see this in the heroical Ukrainian youth who defend their country in such a brave manner. My question is, do you think that all of these aspects motivate young people's participation in decision-making processes on security issues? And do you believe in their power to play their role as principal actors in peace-building initiatives? Thank you so much.
That's a really important question. And my very simple answer is yes. Now more than ever, young people do need to be part of the social, economic, political processes in their societies, and particularly the ones that affect security issues. I really commend the young people of Romania, as you were describing, who are showing solidarity with their counterparts, the young people of Ukraine, during this really horrible time of unprovoked war by Russia against Ukraine. And I think there are several ways of doing that. Clearly, being involved in a very active way, volunteering, providing support, gives you a platform and gives you the experience so that your voice can be not only heard, but listened to. I think there's also the chance to form organizations so that it's not just a single voice of resilience and hope that they can be part of a problem-solving effort, but bringing together more young people in social and political organizations so that your voices can be heard collectively. So I absolutely believe that your question is an important one, and we do need to look for ways to lift up not just the voices of young people, but their participation in the decision making, particularly in peace building at the front lines and beyond. And I would add that something Chelsea said earlier, and becoming involved in politics, becoming active yourself, looking for ways to really make an impact. And I thank you for that question.
Rosalind, the only thing that I would add to my mom is that I do think kind of what we've seen in the kind of cross-continent kind of movement building led by young people kind of related to demanding climate action, while it hasn't yet translated into kind of political influence where we can really say, like, look at these millions of young people who then catalyze this specific change. I do think it is a hugely important part of building the pressure that will catalyze the change. And so I think that kind of looking at what has been effective in terms of kind of movement building, movement sustaining, what has been kind of really operationalized in the climate space may be useful for you as you think about this in the security and the peace building space. And thank you so much for your question.
Wow, that was a wonderful conversation. I want to thank all of our students for their thoughtful questions, and thank Secretary Clinton and Chelsea for joining us today.
Vinny, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Hello, I am Tiki Ainake, CGI U alum, former mentee of 2018, a mentor in 2020, a reserve mentor in 2021 until this day. Welcome. This is a wonderful time that we've had at this conference. Meeting with each other, listening to the stories. This journey is a wonderful journey. I remember when I was a mentee, I had a project for economic development that would support transgender people in their endeavors for work. That turned into trainings that went on. And currently today, I'm a doctoral student at Alliant International University in Fresno, where I continue my research on affirmative therapy. As a reserve mentor, I realize that all of you mentees for this cohort are facing the challenges of the invitation to lead greatly. You know, this is going to be a wonderful journey, and I wanted to share a story with you about that journey. One of my mentees, Ashikur from Bangladesh, I remember when he first came to me and told me he was distraught. He was facing his own life issues, from poverty to access to healthcare. And he had a series of videos on mental health as he was trying to launch mental health awareness and psychoeducation in Bangladesh. While doing this, he told me, "Mentor Tiki, nobody watches my videos." And I said, "Ashikur, how do people in Bangladesh get the news?" And he said, "Well, they listen to the radio." So I told Ashikur, what you need is not the internet. What you need is a radio station. And Ashikur said, "Okay." I go, "Can you call the radio station?" And he said, "Well, it's very difficult." I go, "Can you go there?" And he said, it's a day's journey and a couple bus rides. So I told Ashikur, "Go to the radio station. Tell them I sent you. And then tell them what you want to do with mental health access to healthcare." And he said, "Can I do that, Mentor Tiki?" I go, "Of course you can. You just tell them I sent you." And he goes, "What will I say?" "Tell them what you told me, that you want to help people in Bangladesh during COVID with regards to their mental health." And so Ashikur made the journey. He took the several buses. He got to the radio station. And then he spoke on the radio. Afterwards, later on, he was invited to speak on TV. He organized volunteers, hundreds. And during a pandemic, while many people were dying of COVID, also people were dying of starvation in Bangladesh. But he, with all his volunteers, organized to feed 1,000 families in Bangladesh. 1,000. It was a proud moment. Later on, Ashikur received the National Award for Volunteerism in Bangladesh. Mentees, I invite you to face the great challenges of leadership. This program will encourage you to do things you only dreamed of. It will push you to make global changes you never thought possible. Enjoy the journey. Enjoy every moment. And we are going to do this together as we support each other. And now, I want you to join the networking opportunity that we've had created for you. Enjoy the journey of leadership. I invite you to face the challenges of leadership and do great things. Thank you.